some reason.
So it's just.
There you go. That should fix it. Yeah. There's also a button that says you got to quiet down another button on the top, I think.
This happened last time for a minute.
There you go. There you
And
go.
then it just straightened itself out.
No, there's a button that you click to.
Microphone. Chicka chicka ba pakata chicka 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 ba chicka
What was I talking about?
QAnon. It's gone.
We're good?
We're good.
Yeah.
All right, nobody move.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I think where I was going with it is that like a lot of these organizations, either they get co-opted or they go.
Nobody move.
Oh,
We're okay. We're okay. Keep going.
can you hear me, Joseph?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So
stop.
I mean, I feel like they get, co-opted sometimes, or maybe sometimes they just get a bad name because of, they're created by rich people trying to make more money or something, But yeah, so I did get that feeling from your book. But what it makes me wonder too is that if she was really studying theosophy and she learned about Blavatsky and AP Sennett's communication with the Brotherhood or the brothers, let's say, who apparently just can talk to each other and communicate through the invisible realms. She probably was trying to go there, trying to get there. I mean, and that's why it's so fascinating that you called your book Dematerialized, because I was just reading in Isis Unveiled. I pulled a quote and now I've lost it now for the show, but how a lot of those adepts and the famous people in our past wanted to do that. They wanted to dematerialize. Like that was part of their goal. They wanted to merge back into the one universal soul, basically.
Yeah. And I don't know where your research took you, but when I was doing it, it's like this interesting journey. You kind of go from the transcendentalist, which had a big impact on her too, because they were from the area of Massachusetts where she was raised. And that sort of started this sort of inward looking, break from ritual and starting to really, trying to find the answers yourself. And then you sort of had right after that, the spiritualist movement happened with Fox sisters and everything like that. And then you had Blavatsky that came along, and she introduced, more concepts with the masters and the adepts and things like that. But you're right. I mean, she gave warnings that, there was that attempt to sort of pump the brakes because, it's not for everyone to jump into. It takes several sort of levels of achievement of meditation and wisdom. So yeah, it was like there was this whole movement kind of happening, and it's just really fascinating how she was sort of trying to be a part of that and infuse a lot of her writing in her. I'm talking about Marcia, and infuse a lot of her writings like that. But it just kind of took a tragic turn.
Yeah, and then you throw drugs into the mix too, like ketamine, and then it's a recipe for something. So and then I was also just telling Darren when we got cut off there a little while ago that I'm surprised she wasn't more well known. Like for her, she did reach quite a level of fame in her own right back then. I'm really surprised that her books aren't a little bit more popular, or that there isn't just a bit more talk about her. It's almost like when she just disappeared off the face of the earth from culture as well, not just physically.
Yeah, it's great that you brought that up because that's one of the reasons why we wrote the book. Like we're looking through this, and it's not just that she studied, she studied psychism and studied astrology, yoga, and theosophy. Like she was connected to these people. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of an amazing part of this. She, Andrew Jackson Davis, who was one of sort of, I guess you could say the sort of founding fathers of the spiritualist movement and really legitimized it after the Fox sisters. He knew Marcia's father's, he knew Marcia's grandfather. He actually boarded with them for a time. They knew the Baileys. Robert Moore was a personal acquaintance with Alison Foster Bailey. At one point, Marcia was writing Alice Bailey, like they're corresponding via letters. In 1972, she crosses paths with Manly P. Hall.
Wow.
Who, was a really she was, and I was looking into him, and he's an extremely prolific writer. I think he wrote over 100 books or manuscripts about just all kinds of metaphysical topics. John Lilly, in research for the book for ketamine, she goes down to Malibu and she visits with John Lilly. She had crossed paths with Timothy Leary. She knew Sybil Leek, who was like a famous witch in Britain. While she's in India from 1955 to 1957. And she just happens to be in a village where the Dalai Lama comes passing through, and she gets a personal blessing from him. My wife Marina and I, we joke she's like this Forrest Gump figure of the New Age, where she just like happens to cross paths with like all these people at these in sort of important times and in these important moments, and she's just kind of going through her life and intersecting with these people. And it's just, you're right. It's really interesting that she just never got to the point where she was really on the map, on the radar. Really the only people who know her, who know much about her, are people who have kind of come across her as they study more of the history of yoga and how it sort of started in the Northeast. And then also, obviously, the people, I would say she's becoming more known lately because of what you said, psilocybin and the mushrooms and the experimentation with drugs like ketamine. People are sort of stumbling upon the fact that she experimented with it and wrote Journeys to the Bright World. So if not for that, it's like she would have had traversed all this, all this stuff and blazed a trail in some areas, but nobody really knows much about her,
Yeah, and I mean, she had a famous brother too, and her dad was very successful. And wasn't he part of the Sheraton hotels or something, or what hotel chain was it? Yeah,
he co-founded the Sheraton hotel chain. So he was a Harvard alum, and they kind of came out of the Great Depression buying properties, and they gobbled up some hotel properties on the cheap, and that's what really catapulted the family into high society in Massachusetts. The properties gained a lot of value, but in addition to that, Robert Moore, her father, was a very shrewd businessman, a very successful entrepreneur. So, and that allowed her to devote her life to metaphysics. So she didn't really, she was born into wealth. By her 20s, the Sheraton Hotel Corporation was doing fantastic, and they were starting to amass a lot of wealth. So she could devote her entire life to metaphysics. She didn't have to worry about a 9 to 5. You're right. Her brother, Robin Moore, he wrote The French Connection. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but that was a big hit movie back in the day. So he was very well known, but she sort of, I don't know, even though she was desperately trying to make a name for herself as an author, and as a mystic, it just never really happened.
It almost worked the opposite. It almost was completely the opposite.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like you couldn't try and experiment and put yourself out there more without with less bang for the buck than she got for it.
Yeah, exactly. So what about the actual crime? Is it a crime? Do you want to talk about that? Do you want to leave a little bit of that for the book, people that want to read the book? But I mean, it was quite a mystery that was really, I don't know if it was ever really officially solved, was it?
Yeah, so let me talk about the basic theories as to what happened.
Yeah, sure.
One of the theories is that she wandered out in the woods high on ketamine the night she disappeared. Certainly plausible. They still had quite a stockpile of ketamine. In fact, the lieutenant who worked the case, who I became I corresponded with him over the years several times trying to work on this and kind of unravel it. At one point, they confiscated 26 full vials of ketamine from the apartment that they were living in at the time, which was a lot of ketamine. the lieutenant, his name is Daryl Bemis, told me that he took enough ketamine out of that apartment to send everybody in the United States on a trip, on a trip. That's how he described it. So they had a lot of ketamine. So certainly plausible that she took a bunch and she wandered out in the woods. However, there are some mitigating circumstances there because when she disappeared, there was a historic cold front, a storm system that had been moving through and lasted for several weeks. In England, they actually call it the winter of discontent. It got so cold. And so it's like a question of, well, how far could she have made it had she done that? So that's one of the theories. There was a theory that, she was suicidal and, her fourth husband had intimated that, she was a bit distraught and was having some sort of, emotional issues. And so that's a theory that she, left the apartment and did herself in. There's the other wild theories that she was kidnapped by a coven of witches because she had run into some self-proclaimed witches in Vancouver. And I guess there were some, they had a little
bad vibes
rift or something
bad
like that.
vibes or something.
So that was kind of a wild theory that happened there. There was some background, suggestions that the mafia may have been involved, but there's no evidence of that.
Why would the mafia have been involved? Just for the hell of it, or did they have an interest?
I think it was
just an easy boogeyman.
I think it wasn't anything really concrete. I think the speculation just surrounded the fact that her family was like really well connected and rich, and maybe there was some like association there with the mafia. But I never found anything that like really established any link to the mafia. The closest I got was that she wanted to buy a property in Ojai at one point, and she really wanted it and just didn't have the financial means to do it and couldn't convince her father to bankroll it. So there's at one point she's speaking with someone who's there locally that she's boasting about someone she knows who has connections to the mob and was going to buy a property for her. And that person writes a letter, like, warning Marcia's parents, like, oh my gosh, she's talking to people connected to the mafia. That's really the closest I came, to finding anything connected to the mob, but I didn't see any direct connections. And then, of course, so then there's so then you get into, there's some stranger theories, like Howard Altunian, who was her fourth husband, suggested that she may have summoned all the metaphysical wisdom that she had attained and dematerialized. So that's one of the reasons why the book is called Dematerialized, because that was a theory he put forth. It also works kind of metaphorically, though, because it's there's the family prominence, the more family fortune, and sort of her story kind of dematerialized. So we thought it was a good title for the book because it kind of worked that way. The final theory, which is one that obviously you have to explore, was Howard Altunian, her fourth husband, involved in her disappearance? And, that's just going to be a common place to start. And anybody who, consumes any true crime knows that there's a very high likelihood that the spouse was involved. I mean, if you watch any of the shows out there, 48 Hours Mystery or Snapped or whatever you like to consume on that stuff, a lot of times it ends up being the spouse, and it ends up being usually something related to money or an affair. So we knew we were going to have to explore that. So we did a pretty extensive look at whether he was involved. And what the book does is that it unravels the publicly held perception of the circumstances surrounding her disappearance and her marriage to her fourth husband, and the rosy picture she was painting to her parents, and it kind of unravels that and explores the theory that he might be involved. Now, ultimately, readers are going to have to make up their own mind. I think it's good to provide some details here. So, Howard Altunian was never charged officially. Like, he was never charged with a crime. He took a polygraph. He passed a polygraph test. There's no direct forensic evidence. So you have to keep in mind, you have to go back to that this is 1979. It's like just before DNA like really starts. So there's no forensic evidence. There's no DNA that directly links him to any kind of murder or anything like that. However, there are things in the book that show that the state of their marriage and the sort of rosy picture that she was presenting to her parents about how her life was going before she disappeared was not all it was cracked up to be. So those are the theories, and we explore all of them in the book. And I think I think the merit of the book and why it's a worthwhile read is that it's the journey getting there. You take a long journey. You learn about her life. You learn about all of her research in the metaphysics, but you also learn the family dynamics, and you learn about the trials and tribulations she went through in her marriages, and then you can't really get the full picture, and you can't really get a meaningful picture about the tragedy that unfolded here until you walk through all of that. So, we just encourage people to read the book and really get a feel for all of that and go through all of the theories and make up their own mind.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's a great story. What's up with her books now? I mean, is there a foundation, or their family have rights to her books or anything like that? Or is there any thought about reprinting, or is there any kind of interest in her work?
I hope that comes. I think it might. I mean, I think there's a chance that Journeys into the Bright World might, because like I said, of the resurgence of experimentation with ketamine. But I hope the others do too. I hope this book, sheds a light on her story, because she's such an interesting person. I mean, when you think about it, you have to give her credit, even though she certainly had her foibles and she made her missteps in her life. You have to give her credit for abandoning what was just like a life delivered on a silver platter. In fact, all of the friction that essentially comes between her and her family was them basically saying, like, look, we've rolled out the red carpet here. You all you have to do is walk down it. There's a life of affluence paved for you here. There's no reason for you to, go off the reservation or do anything controversial or do anything dangerous or risky. And she said, no, I'm not going to do that. And she was an extremely intelligent woman, a free thinker, independent, bold, and had a real gift for writing, and had a gift for yoga too, and had a gift for speaking. I mean, she, everybody who heard her speak said that she was, she had so much magnetism, and they loved hearing her speak, and she had a real gift for that. And so I hope the story does shine a light, and her other books do become more popular, because she wrote, before Journeys in the Bright World, she wrote a book called Hypersentience, and that book is about using a hypnotic technique to access past lives, but she didn't even want to limit it to that. She said that you could access even future lives or just alternate planes of existence by using this technique. And in fact, she got a lot of criticism amongst the metaphysical community, because they were saying, look, like you were saying about Blavatsky, no, it takes intense meditation and discipline and years of doing that before you can take the risk of accessing those realms. And she said, no, I'm trying to make this something that is more accessible to the masses. And it's an interesting, whether you subscribe to that or not, or whether you think she was doing something that was too cavalier, it's a super interesting read. And then if you go back before that, she wrote a book called Diet, Sex, and Yoga. And she was introducing yoga in a way that was like, very relatable. And in addition to that, like a lot of the dietary stuff.
Vegetarianism, right?
Yeah, vegetarianism. And also she was warning about like uremic acid and things about like eating too much meat. And she was warning about that, like she was well ahead of it becoming, popular in the 80s and 90s, as people started to kind of pick that up, and people, a lot of books were being written about nutrition, whether I remember like The Zone and then there came paleo, and then like there's all these different offshoots, and then vegetarianism is becoming very popular. But she was like doing that way before, you know. So yeah, I mean, and then she wrote a book called Astrology: The Divine Science, which, I mean, it's a huge book. We have a copy of it. It's like a very comprehensive introduction to astrology, and it was very highly regarded. I mean, it's a really, really good book. So, you know, we hope it shines more light on all of that, because she was a remarkable woman in her own way. She had her missteps shortly, but in her own way, she was very remarkable, and it makes what happened to her all the more tragic. You know, like when I look at certain shows, because there's a lot of shows now that deal with metaphysics, like whether it's like, you know, I used to watch Ancient Aliens, just, you know, it's just fun. It's really interesting and fun to have it on.
Yeah.
And some of the people that appear on that show, like what's her name, Linda Moulton Howe, I think is her name.
Yeah.
Like whenever I see her on that show, I just think of Marsha. Like, I think she would have been on the show, or she would have been on a show like this.
Totally.
And she would have. Yeah, she would have been speaking about it. She would have been talking about everything from extraterrestrials to lost civilization to astrology to reincarnation. And she wasn't just. It wasn't just a superficial level of knowledge. She really studied this stuff. She really knew what she was talking about. It's just so tragic that you know, her life just ended so prematurely.
How old was she when she died?
50.
Yeah. Wow. That is, premature. I mean, and she was in like you said, India in the 50s, and then she died in the late 70s. So that's a pretty long journey, you know? Yeah.
Yep.
So how has this changed your life, learning about all this? Because like you said at the beginning, like, it was pretty overwhelming going through all this and researching it, and it's so deep, all these topics. Like, have you had a new appreciation for the metaphysics, or a different one, or lack of appreciation?
Oh man, that's a great question. That's a great question, and kind of like that's a deep question. I think what happened was I was raised Catholic. I'm sort of, you know, I consider myself Christian. I guess I'm sort of a recovering Catholic, but
I was going to say it, but I didn't want to assume. But yeah, we hear that quite a bit.
That's okay. It's fine. I mean, I love Christianity. I really do. I think the way I would describe it, I kind of feel like what I did was, it's like you left home to go backpacking through Europe or something, and, you know, you have this amazing adventure, and it broadens your horizon. You see all these new things you've never seen before, and all these concepts and philosophies and belief systems. And then you had an amazing time. It changed your life, everything you saw, and then you kind of came back home, and it made you, like, appreciate or just feel like, I'm back home. You know what I mean? That's not to say that, like, I don't, you know, I would never begrudge anybody from exploring all these different belief systems and things like that. I mean, I think you should, and I don't think you should really, you know, tell young people, you know, not to dabble in those things, because the more taboo you make it, the more they're going to want to do it anyway.
Yeah, good point.
So, but I think what I was amazed with, I guess what I would say is kind of rambling here, but when I explored all these different, one of the things I learned was that there is a lot of commonalities to them. Like when I looked at Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, there's commonalities across that. Theosophy, I thought, it's interesting. I think there's some really good intention there. Theosophy, I thought, was a little bit more esoteric and like not quite as, it didn't quite resonate as much with me, but I thought it was an interesting exploration. And I think, did you ever read, there's a book out there called 100 Years of Theosophy, and the author is Joy Mills. Did you ever read that book?
No.
Oh, okay. So basically it just talks about the history of theosophy. Well, one of the things I found that was like really interesting and kind of funny in a way was even in the beginnings of theosophy, there was infighting there. Like there was a man named William Judge, who was one of the early theosophists who rose to prominence in the American section of the Theosophical Society. And there was a rift between him and Annie Besant and Alcott, Henry Steele Alcott. There was a rift there because they were accusing him of getting messages from the masters that were fraudulent. And I was reading this and I just thought to myself, it almost made me feel better about just some of the, like Christianity, some of the more traditional disciplines, because you realize that like infighting and tribalism, it's in everything. It's in any kind of religion, belief system, or what have you. It gave me like a different perspective of that. So it certainly broadened my horizons and all that. And I think it's all really fascinating, interesting. And I feel like I barely scratched the surface of it. But at the end, I think I just kind of came around to, okay, like I felt almost better about my own kind of beliefs and things like that. So
what about Marina? What would she say, do you think, to that question?
Oh, I don't know. Something pretty similar, I would think.
Yeah.
So I think she would sort of feel the same way. But, I wouldn't want to, I'd get in trouble trying to speak for her.
What about future plans? Future plans? What about future plans now that this book is out and stuff? Or?
That's a good question. I don't know what we're going to do from here. I mean, people ask me, are you going to continue to write? I would love to continue writing. I love writing. I didn't even mind, as you guys know, because you've authored books, the rounds that you go through with editing and reshaping and revamping and restructuring and all of that and everything that goes into making a book. I didn't even mind it, even though, at times it was tedious and hair pulling. I would love to write. I just don't know. I certainly will say I don't know if I would ever do something like this again. And I'll tell you why. It took a toll on me writing about real people's lives. Because you're trying to do your best to be fair and even-handed, and also there's this thing where you get to know these people, so it becomes really hard. So let me give you an example. John Moore, who is Marcia's brother, he's the one who was really kind of communicating with, he's the one kind of involved in the investigation after her disappearance. Well, we met him, Marina and I went to have lunch with him once at the Concord Inn in Concord, Massachusetts. It couldn't have been more pleasant. Nicest guy, really cordial and nice. But then when I start going through the materials, I see, and this is in the book, he had a rift with a kind of a fallout with Marcia in the sort of the year preceding her disappearance. And what ended up happening is right at the beginning of the investigation, he's telling the Lieutenant Errol Bemis that, I think she was probably out of her mind, whacked out on ketamine. And it's like right at the start of the investigation. I was just like, when I read that, I just couldn't believe he did that, because I'm thinking about it like, if it was my own sister and I don't know anything about the circumstances of her disappearance, why would you offer that right off the bat? It just seemed like it was a big mistake that ended up feeding the narrative right off the bat that it was related to ketamine, or it was related to the fact that she was this spaced out ketamine junkie, which was sort of this perception out there that the press ran with. And so it was hard to then write that, that was kind of like not a great thing that John did there. And then in addition to that, there's Lieutenant Bemis. So Lieutenant Bemis, he helped me out a lot in the beginning of this. I flew up to Washington in 2010, and that's where a lot of it, where we started gathering a lot of the materials. And he would call me, and we'd exchange phone calls, and he helped me out a lot. And in the book, one of the things that you'll see is like, how did this tragedy happen? You can see very early on it gets extremely distracted with the occult. So you've got, astrologers calling in and writing into the sheriff's office saying, I know what happened to Marcia. I had the psychic vision of this. And you have astrologers, and Howard's also feeding this. I mean, he's stoking this fire constantly. And Lieutenant Bemis gets a little bit enticed by that whole thing. And what happens in the book is that it gets a little bit the investigation itself gets a little bit sidetracked, and things are missed, and things are overlooked, and he comes extremely close on a couple of occasions to some revelations about what happened to Marcia, but just doesn't quite get there because of the distraction of all the occult stuff. And it was hard to write that after he had helped me so much really kickstart the story, So that took a toll. And then you're writing about the family. And, for example, Marsha's brother, Bill Moore, there's like a quick paragraph about him in the book. And it basically just says that, he was overlooked by the family and, he had some money problems and stuff like that. But, as you know, as writers, you have constraints placed on you. You have word count constraints, and you have to try and encapsulate these people's lives, and to do it in a paragraph is really hard to do that. I mean, Marsha's brother Bill Moore was a member of Mensa. He was a brilliant man, and he was a loving father. So, you're trying to write about these people, but it's very hard because you realize that it's extremely hard to encapsulate someone's life in a paragraph or a couple paragraphs, or even with all the room that we were given to explore Marsha's life and flesh out Marsha's life.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, that's a good point. I mean, I think it comes across well in the book that I think I mentioned that, like, even about talking about the organizations and the family, like, it never comes across as accusatory or fake or, what's the word I'm looking for when you kind of blow something up, like
fallacious or something.
Yeah.
Or
like
that. Yeah.
Or trying to over exaggerate something or whatever. No, it doesn't, like, it comes across very genuine and authentic. So.
Oh, that's great feedback. I really appreciate that. And the book itself, and that's why, we encourage people to really read it. It's very quote heavy. And we did that purposely. We did that because we wanted these people involved in this story to speak for themselves. And they almost, like, we kind of feel like if we did anything, right in the book, it was that it sort of allows you to step back into 1979 and know these people and hear them in their own pattern of speaking and kind of get to know who they are.
Yeah.
And that took a tremendous amount of work because, as you might imagine, you have to get rights to use all these quotations and do all this stuff. So that was a tremendous amount of work, but we really wanted to do that. We really wanted to, and the other thing is I don't really like, one of the things I kind of object to in my own reading and in my own content consumption, whether it's reading or whether it's just, watching documentaries or other things. I don't like when people are too heavy-handed with these are all the conclusions you should definitely draw, and this is how you should feel. We want people to read the book and draw their own conclusions and feel their own way they feel about the story.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it would make a good movie, honestly. I kind of picture it in my head, like her going through all this stuff and all these things and all the different marriages and the drugs and
it'd have to be an indie movie.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a cool story. Yeah,
I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot to work with visually, right? Because you can do. I mean, imagine you can show scenes where she's doing past life regression. I mean, it's unusual and interesting things that people just don't see in the day-to-day, like actually seeing somebody do a past life regression session. Then you have
the yoga in India, the family conflicts, and I mean, it could just be fantastic. Yeah.
Fantastical.
And then imagine what you could do. Imagine what you could do with the ketamine scene.
yeah, totally. You could show the K-hole.
You could take some shit from like Fear and Loathing.
Yeah. Right on.
Totally.
Yeah, thanks for being. We're proud to be your first to take your podcast, Jerry. We're sorry it had to be such a weird, awkward thing where we had all the disconnections and all that. But I mean, you took it like a champ, like an old pro.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so sorry about the disruptions. I don't know what happened there, but I appreciate you guys hanging with it and reconnecting and stuff and let me speak about the book and about Marsha Moore's story.
Yeah. No worries.
Really appreciate that.
No worries. How can people get the book and get a hold of you?
So they can find the book. It's called Dematerialized, The Mysterious Disappearance of Marsha Moore. And Marsha is spelled M-A-R-C-I-A for people who are listening. And Moore is M-O-O-R. And you can find the book at Barnes & Nobles and Amazon, Amazon, Target, and Walmart. Most places where books are sold. And there's a lot of great picks in the books too. So it's just great. I mean, you really get a great feel for her family and a lot of the stuff that was going on in the New Age stuff. So great picks in the book too. You can follow us on Instagram at Marsha Moore Story, just all together, Marsha Moore Story. And that's pretty much it for now. You can follow us there or buy the book, and we really appreciate any of the support. I mean, as first-time authors, you guys know how it is. I mean, just trying to get your voice out there or get your book out there to be seen in a sea of people out there is really hard.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we'll do our best, and we'll put it in the show notes. And yeah, I really like the story, and congratulations.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And it was great talking with you guys. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, good stuff.
Totally,
Thanks,
man.
Yeah.
You have a great night.
Okay, you too. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, it was great for me because we got to hear Darren's K-hole story.
Oh, yeah, that might have been the first time. Hey, big thanks to Joseph for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. And, so I don't think the interruption should have been too bad for you guys. We kept you going. We got the K-hole story and whatever else along the way. I mean, we do our best. But big thanks to you guys for listening. Big thanks to Joseph for coming on the show. Proud to be his first show. I wish it would have went a little smoother for him. Hopefully that doesn't discourage him from doing other podcasts. But it worked great on the phone. You know what I noticed? The phone audio was great.
Yeah, there was a bit of a delay still, but yeah, it's better. Yeah.
There's a bunch of food.
Yeah, it's just audiobooks. I mean, we could talk about
Check out the
audiobooks because,
audiobooks.
I mean, there's a bunch of these theosophical books out there now. Occult World just came out. When this comes out,
Graham
it'll
is
be out
probably the theosophical narrator of our time. I was actually looking at some Audible Hall of Famers today, and I was like, Graham's going to be there one day.
Shut up.
So, I think that's like 27 or 28 books out now.
That's crazy.
The Occult World, 7 Principles of Man, what the ancient wisdom expects of its disciples.
That's Manly P. Hall there, dude.
Problems with philosophy.
It's a short, like 50-page, I don't know how long it ended up being,
Isis
the Manly P.
Unveiled,
Hall
Volume
one,
1.
but yeah.
They're about 2 hours each. Isis Unveiled, Volume 1, all the secret doctrines, secret teachings of all ages, Hamlet's Mill. I mean, they just keep going. Adultbrain.ca if you want to check out that whole list. We'd appreciate it if you could. And
that helps us out big time. If you buy that and buy one of those from Audible or wherever. And
even if you don't have Audible,
give us
you
a
can
review.
Go try it out for free, and I think we still get paid. I don't know if we do, actually, but we'll see. And give us a review the book. Let us know what you think. Of course, you can head over to Grimerica.ca. If you're not sick of us from this show, you can listen to more of us over there, where we go for 2 hours over there. Of course, to get the second hour, you have to be a Grimerica Outlawed Plus member for $6 a month. Head over to GrimericaOutlawed.ca today. Check out that action. And is that it? Oh, support the show, please. Grimerica.ca/support. 2020, 2021, tough years with all the COVID bullshit. Hopefully everyone's starting to get back to work now in some capacity. Maybe some monthlies get reinstated, or maybe you're in a new job. You can start one of your own if you haven't had one yet. But, huge thanks to the people who kept us going through COVID. Without them, the show might have not made it. But
no, and we couldn't be doing this. I couldn't be doing this as my job either.
No. So Grimerica.ca/support. If you're getting a little value from the show, if you think it's worth something to you, head over to Grimerica.ca/support today and let us know what it's worth. You decide. We love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. So the live motherfuckers, thanks for fucking putting up with all that.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks.
That was a bit of a train wreck of a live show as far as trying to tune in with all that stuff. But, looks like you guys enjoyed it. So, 2 hours each, Phil. You might want to fucking get on there. No OnlyFans coming. Plus is as good as it gets for now. We're going to stop going live probably in the new year. So, just a heads up.
We'll still do some videos on Rockfin probably, but
we'll still do some live shows once in a while.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
But not every week, I don't think. Anyway, Graham at Grimerica.com. If you have a problem with that, thanks for tuning in, guys.